Montana Territory, 1878. The mountain winds howled across the vast expanse of the Diamond D Ranch as Victor Daniels stood on his porch, watching storm clouds gather over the distant peaks. At 33, he had built an empire of 20,000 acres, but the vastness of his land only emphasized the emptiness of his life. The war had taken more than his leg. It had taken his faith in humanity. "Mr. Fitzgerald," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard to his ranch manager. "Is there any word on a new cook?" The older man trudged up the steps, removing his hat. "Yes, sir. There's a woman arriving on tomorrow's stage from Helena. Teacher by trade, but times being what they are." Victor nodded curtly. Since Mrs. Peterson had left to care for her ailing sister 3 weeks ago, the ranch hands had been subjected to his housekeeper's abysmal cooking attempts. Even the most loyal of his 20 cowboys threatened mutiny if something didn't change soon. "Very well. See that someone meets her at the stage." As Fitzgerald departed, Victor gazed out at the approaching storm. A schoolteacher cooking for cowboys. This ought to be interesting. Rebecca Matthews clutched her small carpet bag as the stagecoach rattled into the tiny town of Pine Ridge. 6 months ago, she had been teaching 30 children in a comfortable schoolhouse in Helena. Now, at 25, she found herself desperately accepting a position as cook at the Diamond D, her teaching position eliminated when the school board decided a married woman should take her place, one whose husband's business could contribute to the town's coffers. The coach lurched to a stop before the general store, and Rebecca smoothed her simple navy traveling dress, hoping she appeared presentable despite the dust of travel. Her modest savings had dwindled to nothing during her desperate search for new employment, and this position, though far from her calling, offered room, board, and wages. "Miss Matthews." A weathered man in his 50s approached as she stepped down. "I'm Fitzgerald, ranch manager for Mr. Daniels. Welcome to Pine Ridge." "Thank you, sir." She offered a small smile, grateful for the courteous reception. "I hope the journey hasn't made me late." "Not at all. The wagon's just over here. We're about 8 miles out of town." He took her bag, leading her to a buckboard. "Fair warning, miss. The boss is particular. Lost his lower leg at Gettysburg. Wears a wooden one now. Some days are better than others with the pain." Rebecca nodded, filing away this information. "I understand, Mr. Fitzgerald. I'll do my best to accommodate Mr. Daniels' needs." The ranch manager helped her onto the wagon seat. "It's not just the leg, miss. The war changed him. He was a different man before, or so they say. I only came on 5 years back." As they pulled away from town, Rebecca watched the buildings give way to open country, wondering what sort of man Victor Daniels had become and whether she could possibly satisfy his expectations. Victor was reviewing ledgers in his study when he heard the wagon return. He remained seated, pretending absorption in his work as he waited for Fitzgerald to bring in the new cook. Voices drifted through the open window, Fitzgerald's gravelly tones and a woman's softer responses as she commented on the impressive size of the ranch house. A knock at the study door announced their arrival. "Enter," he called, not looking up immediately. "Mr. Daniels, this is Miss Rebecca Matthews," Fitzgerald said. Victor raised his eyes and found himself momentarily struck silent. He had expected a matronly woman, perhaps worn down by life's disappointments. Instead, before him stood a slender young woman with intelligent hazel eyes and chestnut hair neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet. Her navy blue dress, though simple and somewhat travel-worn, was clearly that of an educated woman, not a domestic servant. He rose, somewhat stiffly due to his prosthetic leg, and nodded. "Miss Matthews, I understand you were previously employed as a teacher." "Yes, sir." Her voice was clear, her diction precise. "For 5 years in Helena." "And what brings a schoolteacher to seek employment as a ranch cook?" He didn't bother softening his tone. "The school board eliminated my position in favor of a married woman." Her chin lifted slightly. "I am fully capable in a kitchen, Mr. Daniels. My mother ensured I could manage a household before she passed." Victor noted the quiet dignity in her stance. No begging, no obsequious fawning. Refreshing, if nothing else. "Fitzgerald will show you to your quarters and the kitchen. You'll be expected to prepare 3 meals daily for myself and the hands. Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 6. Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper, will acquaint you with the pantry and cold cellar." "Very well, Mr. Daniels." "One more thing, Miss Matthews." Victor fixed her with a stern gaze. I expect competence and punctuality. This is a working ranch, not a schoolroom. A flash of something, perhaps irritation, crossed her features before she composed herself. I assure you, Mr. Daniels, I understand the difference. After they departed, Victor sat heavily in his chair, massaging his aching leg. Something about the schoolteacher unsettled him. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity in her eyes that seemed to evaluate him even as he assessed her. Whatever the case, he had more important matters to attend to than pondering his new cook. Rebecca followed Mrs. Wilson, a thin woman with perpetually pursed lips, through a tour of the enormous kitchen. The master likes his coffee strong, his beef rare, and his bread fresh, Mrs. Wilson intoned. 20 hands to feed, plus the master, Mr. Fitzgerald, myself, and now you. The previous cook, Mrs. Peterson, left her recipes in that drawer. She pointed to a battered wooden cabinet. The pantry is stocked weekly. If you need anything, make a list for Fitzgerald to take to town. Rebecca surveyed the substantial kitchen with its massive iron stove, long preparation tables, and extensive shelving. This would be her domain now. The hands eat in the bunkhouse dining room. Mr. Daniels takes his meals in the formal dining room or his study. You'll serve him personally. I see, Rebecca replied, mentally cataloging the information. And what time should I begin breakfast preparations? 4 o'clock. The hands start early. Mrs. Wilson sniffed. I've been attempting to manage since Mrs. Peterson left, but cooking was never my strong suit. I'll be ready, Rebecca assured her. After Mrs. Wilson departed, Rebecca explored the kitchen, familiarizing herself with its layout. The pantry was impressively stocked: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, preserved fruits, and more. The cold cellar contained sides of beef, bacon, eggs, milk, and butter. At least she wouldn't want for ingredients. She was examining Mrs. Peterson's recipe book when the kitchen door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache entered, hat in hand. Begging your pardon, miss. I'm Charlie, the foreman. Wanted to introduce myself, seeing as you'll be feeding me and the boys. His smile was warm and genuine beneath his mustache. And maybe mention that if you can manage anything better than Mrs. Wilson's Johnny cakes, hard enough to use as horseshoes, we'll all be mighty grateful. Rebecca laughed, her first real laugh in weeks. I believe I can promise improvement there, at least. That's all we ask, miss. He replaced his hat. The boys and I, we appreciate you coming. Things get mighty grim around here without decent food. After Charlie left, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, thinking about her new situation. The ranch was impressive, larger and more prosperous than she'd anticipated. The staff seemed kind enough, save perhaps for Mrs. Wilson's pinched disapproval. And then there was Mr. Daniels himself, handsome in a severe way, with intense blue eyes and dark hair touched with silver at the temples despite his relatively young age. His obvious intelligence and the well-thumbed books she'd glimpsed in his study suggested an educated man, but the hardness in his expression spoke of deep-seated pain beyond his physical injury. Well, Rebecca, she murmured to herself, you wanted employment, and now you have it. Best make the most of it. Victor woke before dawn, as was his custom, the persistent ache in his missing limb making sleep elusive as always. He dressed carefully, strapping on his wooden prosthetic with practiced movements, then made his way downstairs, his cane thumping softly against the hardwood floors. To his surprise, light already spilled from beneath the kitchen door, and enticing aromas wafted through the house. Coffee, real coffee, not the weak concoction Mrs. Wilson produced, and something sweet and yeasty. He pushed open the door to find Miss Matthews already at work, her sleeves rolled up and a practical apron protecting her simple gray dress. Dough was rising on the counter, bacon sizzled in an iron skillet, and she moved with efficient grace between tasks. She looked up, momentarily startled. Good morning, Mr. Daniels. Coffee is ready if you'd like some. Victor nodded, moving to the pot and pouring himself a cup. The rich aroma alone was promising. He took a cautious sip and couldn't suppress a small sound of appreciation. This is quite good. Thank you, sir. She continued working, cracking eggs into a bowl with one hand while checking the bread with the other. Breakfast will be ready shortly. Would you prefer to take it in the dining room or your study? The study. He watched her efficient movements. You've been cooking long? Since I was a girl. My mother believed practical skills were as important as academic ones. She glanced up briefly, even for a daughter destined for teaching. There was something refreshing about her directness. No simpering, no excessive deference, just honest competence. "The men will be in soon," he said. "I'll leave you to it." In his study, Victor found himself pensively staring out the window as dawn broke over the mountains. When Rebecca brought in his breakfast tray, the sight momentarily stunned him. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven, eggs cooked perfectly, crisp bacon, and sliced fruit arranged with simple elegance. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Daniels?" "No. Thank you, Miss Matthews." After she left, he ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been a long time since food had been more than mere sustenance to him. The simple pleasure of a well-prepared meal felt almost foreign. Later that morning, passing by the bunkhouse, he overheard the ranch hands talking. "God almighty, those biscuits. Thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Boss finally hired someone who knows which end of a spoon to hold." Victor permitted himself a small, satisfied nod. Perhaps this schoolteacher would work out after all. By the end of her first week, Rebecca had established a routine. Rising at 3:30, she began breakfast preparations, served Mr. Daniels in his study, then fed the hungry cowboys who arrived in waves as their duties permitted. Mornings were spent preparing dinner, the large midday meal that sustained the men through their afternoon work, while afternoons allowed time for bread baking, dessert preparation, and starting the evening supper. The work was physically demanding, but she found unexpected satisfaction in it. The genuine appreciation of the ranch hands, expressed through cleared plates and enthusiastic compliments, was a balm to her wounded pride after the dismissal from her teaching position. Mr. Daniels remained mostly distant, taking his meals in solitude, though she noted he now finished everything she prepared. Occasionally she would glimpse him through the window, supervising work on the ranch, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance, his limp more pronounced on days when storm clouds gathered. On Sunday, her one afternoon of relative leisure after preparing a cold supper, Rebecca ventured out to explore the ranch grounds. The main house was an impressive two-story structure of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Behind it stood the bunkhouse, barn, stables, and various outbuildings required for the operation of such a substantial cattle ranch. She walked toward a small rise overlooking a creek, drawn by the peaceful setting. To her surprise, she found Victor already there, seated on a fallen log, staring out at the water. "I apologize for intruding, Mr. Daniels," she said, preparing to retreat. "I didn't realize anyone was here." He glanced up, his expression unreadable. "No need to leave on my account, Miss Matthews. The creek is pleasant on a warm afternoon." Taking this as permission, Rebecca sat on a rock a respectful distance away. "It's beautiful land you have here." "It is." Something in his tone suggested he rarely took time to appreciate that fact. "Have you owned it long?" 12 years. Bought the first parcel before the war with money my father left me. Added to it after." Rebecca watched a hawk circling lazily overhead. "It must be gratifying to build something so substantial. It passes the time." His eyes remained on the distant mountains. "Is that all it does for you?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted her forwardness. Victor's head turned, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers with sudden intensity. "What would you have it do, Miss Matthews?" She should have apologized and withdrawn the question. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. "Bring joy, perhaps. Purpose. A sense of creating something meaningful. Joy." He almost seemed to taste the word. "A luxury for those with fewer responsibilities." "I've never found joy to be a luxury, Mr. Daniels, but rather a necessity, like air or water." She stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "But I've taken enough of your time and spoken too freely. Please excuse me." As she walked back toward the house, she felt his eyes following her. Something about Victor Daniels troubled her deeply, not because he was unkind or unreasonable, but because the emptiness she sometimes glimpsed in his expression seemed so at odds with the beautiful world he had built around himself. "Miss Matthews, a word." Rebecca looked up from the dough she was kneading to see Victor standing in the doorway of the kitchen, his expression serious as always. "Of course, Mr. Daniels. I've received word that the governor and several investors will be visiting the ranch next week. They're considering funding a railway spur to Pine Ridge, which would significantly benefit our shipping capabilities." He stepped further into the kitchen. I'll need you to prepare a special dinner for 8 on Thursday evening. Rebecca wiped flour from her hands. I would be happy to. Did you have a particular menu in mind? Something that showcases the quality of Diamond D beef, naturally. Beyond that, I trust your judgment. He hesitated. Mrs. Wilson typically serves formal dinners, but her health has been poor lately. Would you be comfortable handling the service as well? I've assisted with formal dinners before, Rebecca assured him, though I may need guidance on your particular preferences for table settings and such. Mrs. Wilson can advise on that. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. This dinner is important, Miss Matthews. These men have the power to either isolate this region further or connect it to markets that would ensure its prosperity. I understand. I'll do my best to help you impress them. Something like surprise flickered across his features at her ready support. Thank you. After he left, Rebecca turned her attention back to her bread, mind already racing with menu ideas. This would be a challenge, but an exciting one, a chance to use skills beyond daily ranch cooking. More importantly, it was an opportunity to assist the taciturn man who employed her in something that clearly mattered deeply to him. Later that afternoon, Fitzgerald came to the kitchen as Rebecca was reviewing Mrs. Peterson's recipe collection. Heard about the dinner, he said, accepting the coffee she offered. Thought you might like to know a bit more about what you're getting into. I would appreciate any insights, Rebecca acknowledged. Governor's bringing some Eastern money men, railroad investors. The boss has been working for years to get a spur line to Pine Ridge. Would cut 3 days off the cattle drive to the main railhead and increase profits substantially. He sipped his coffee. But there's more to it than money. Rebecca raised an eyebrow questioningly. Town's dying, Miss Matthews. Young folks leaving, businesses closing. Railway would bring life back. Mail service, regular supplies, connection to the wider world. His weathered face grew serious. Boss won't say it, but he cares about the people here. Employs half the men in the county. Quietly paid for the doctor to stay when he was considering moving to Billings. I hadn't realized. This glimpse of Victor's character intrigued her. Keeps his good deeds quiet, does Mr. Daniels. But this dinner, it matters. Fitzgerald set down his cup. Thought you should know. The information changed Rebecca's perspective. This wasn't merely about impressing wealthy men. It was about the future of an entire community. As she returned to planning her menu, she felt a new determination to help Victor succeed, not just for his sake, but for all those who depended on the prosperity of the region. The day of the dinner arrived, and Rebecca had been working since before dawn. The menu she had designed was ambitious. A consommé to start, followed by roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, glazed carrots, potato dauphinoise, fresh bread, and for dessert, a rich apple tart with custard sauce. She had even convinced Fitzgerald to bring fresh butter from town and splurged on lemons for the flavoring. By late afternoon, the kitchen was filled with enticing aromas, and Rebecca was putting the finishing touches on the table settings in the formal dining room when Victor entered. He was dressed in a well-tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. Despite his prosthetic leg, he moved with a commanding presence that made her suddenly aware of her plain appearance in her work dress. Everything seems to be in order, he observed, surveying the elegant table with its polished silver and crystal glasses. You've done well, Miss Matthews. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. The food is on schedule as well. She straightened a napkin nervously. I should change before they arrive. Of course. He seemed about to say something more, then merely nodded and withdrew. In her small room, Rebecca changed into her best dress, a deep green wool with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It wasn't fashionable by Eastern standards, but it was clean, well-made, and the most formal attire she possessed. She arranged her hair in a simple but neat chignon and pinched her cheeks for color before returning to the kitchen. The guests arrived precisely at 7. Rebecca watched through the kitchen window as Victor greeted the governor and 5 other well-dressed gentlemen, along with one woman, evidently the wife of one of the investors. Their fine clothing and confident bearing marked them as people of wealth and influence. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca coordinated with Mrs. Wilson to ensure flawless service. She personally carried in each course, presenting the food with quiet confidence before returning to the kitchen to prepare the next dish. From the dining room came sounds of animated conversation and occasional appreciative comments about the meal. As she entered with the dessert, She overheard one of the investors saying, "I must say, Daniels, when you invited us to dinner at a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, I hardly expected cuisine of this caliber." "I'm fortunate in my staff," Victor replied, his eyes meeting Rebecca's briefly as she set the apple tart before him. After serving dessert, Rebecca remained in the kitchen, exhausted but satisfied with the evening's execution. Everything had gone according to plan, and the food had been received with evident appreciation. She was washing the last of the cooking pots when Victor appeared in the doorway. "They've gone to the study for brandy," he said. "I wanted to thank you, Miss Matthews." The dinner exceeded all expectations. Rebecca dried her hands on her apron. "I'm pleased it went well. Did you make progress with your railway discussions?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Indeed. They were particularly impressed by the quality of Diamond D beef and how it might be received in Eastern markets if properly transported. He stepped further into the kitchen. "Your contribution to that impression was significant. I'm glad I could help." She found herself suddenly conscious of how they stood alone in the kitchen, the house quiet save for the distant murmur of male voices from the study. Victor seemed to realize it too, for he straightened and retreated a step. "You should rest. It's been a long day." "Yes. Good night, Mr. Daniels." "Good night, Miss Matthews." As she climbed the stairs to her room later, Rebecca reflected on the unexpected warmth in Victor's voice when he had thanked her. Perhaps beneath his stern exterior lay a man capable of greater warmth than he typically displayed, a man who, as Fitzgerald had suggested, cared more for others than his gruff manner indicated. The dinner proved successful beyond immediate expectations. 2 weeks later, word arrived that the railway investors had approved preliminary funding for the spur line to Pine Ridge. The news transformed the ranch. Cowboys hooped with joy, Fitzgerald walked with a lighter step, and even Mrs. Wilson's perpetual frown softened. Only Victor maintained his usual reserved demeanor, though Rebecca noticed subtle changes. He began taking breakfast in the kitchen rather than his study, ostensibly to discuss the day's meals, but increasingly lingering over coffee to converse about other matters. Books they had both read, news from the territorial paper, or the changing seasons. One morning in late September, as Rebecca kneaded dough for the day's bread, Victor sat at the kitchen table with his coffee. "Miss Matthews, I've been meaning to ask, do you miss teaching?" The question caught her off guard. She paused, hands deep in flour. "I do. Very much. I miss the children, their curiosity, the moment when understanding dawns in their eyes." She resumed her kneading with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "But circumstances change, and we must adapt." "Indeed." He seemed to consider his next words carefully. "I understand Pine Ridge has been without a teacher since spring. The previous one left to marry." Rebecca looked up sharply. "I wasn't aware. The town council has struggled to find a replacement. Few qualified teachers wish to relocate to such a remote location." He traced the rim of his coffee cup. "With the railway coming, perhaps that will change. But for now, a dozen children go without formal education. That's unfortunate." Rebecca felt a familiar ache at the thought of children deprived of learning. "It is." Victor rose, setting down his cup. "Thank you for the coffee, Miss Matthews." He left her puzzled by the conversation and wondering why he had raised the subject of Pine Ridge's educational situation. Did he wish her to leave? Was he subtly suggesting she seek the teaching position? But no, that made little sense, as he had repeatedly expressed satisfaction with her cooking. The mystery remained unresolved until Sunday afternoon, when Charlie knocked at the kitchen door as Rebecca was preparing a simple supper. "Begging your pardon, Miss Matthews. Boss asked me to saddle a horse for you, if you'd care to ride into town with him. Says there's someone he'd like you to meet." "Me?" Rebecca blinked in surprise. "Did he say who?" "No, ma'am. Just that it concerned something you discussed." Charlie grinned. "Don't worry. I've saddled Daisy for you. Gentlest mare on the place." Still perplexed but intrigued, Rebecca quickly changed into her Sunday dress and joined Victor in the yard, where he waited astride his large bay gelding. Charlie helped her mount the placid mare. "I apologize for the short notice," Victor said as they set off down the road to Pine Ridge. "Mayor Taylor is only in town today, and I thought it important you meet him." "The mayor?" Rebecca adjusted her skirts over the side saddle. "May I ask why? I believe you mentioned missing your teaching." Victor kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I spoke with the town council last week about Pine Ridge's need for an educator." Rebecca's heart quickened. You spoke to them about me? I mentioned that a qualified teacher currently employed as a cook might be persuaded to consider a more fitting position should suitable arrangements be made. Now he glanced at her, expression serious. I hope I haven't overstepped. No, I mean, she took a breath to compose herself. I'm grateful you thought of me, but I'm confused. If I were to teach, who would cook for the ranch? Mrs. Peterson returns next week. Her sister has recovered. He guided his horse around a muddy section of road. I received her letter yesterday confirming her arrival on Friday's stage. I see. Rebecca felt a complicated mix of emotions. Excitement at the prospect of returning to teaching, but also a surprising reluctance to leave Diamond D. And the council is willing to consider me, despite my being unmarried? They're desperate enough to overlook such concerns, Victor said dryly. Besides, I may have mentioned that the railway investors were impressed by the educational priorities of communities they serve. Rebecca couldn't help laughing. That was rather cunning of you, Mr. Daniels. The hint of a smile touched his lips. Merely practical. In Pine Ridge, they tied their horses outside the small building that served as both town hall and post office. Inside, Mayor Taylor, a portly man with an impressive mustache, greeted them effusively. Miss Matthews, a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Daniels speaks very highly of your qualifications. He pumped her hand enthusiastically. We've been at our wits' end trying to find a teacher. The children are running wild, and parents are threatening to move to bigger towns with established schools. The conversation that followed was everything Rebecca could have hoped for. The salary was modest but fair, and the town had a small cottage available for the teacher's use. Nothing fancy, mind you, but snug enough, with a garden plot. Of course, we'll need to order proper books and supplies, the mayor continued. The railway will make that easier, thank the Lord. Until then, perhaps you could start with what we have? The children could at least begin learning again. When would you want me to start? Rebecca asked, trying to contain her excitement. As soon as you're able. Monday week, perhaps. Victor, who had been mostly silent during the meeting, now spoke. Mrs. Peterson returns Friday. Miss Matthews could relocate over the weekend, if that suits. The mayor beamed. Excellent. I'll have the cottage ready by then. As they rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, Rebecca's mind whirled with plans and possibilities. I can hardly believe it, she said. To be teaching again, it's more than I dared hope for. You were wasted as a cook, Victor said simply. Skilled as you are in the kitchen. Thank you for thinking of me. She studied his profile, strong and handsome in the slanting sunlight. Though I find I'll miss certain aspects of ranch life. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. Pine Ridge isn't far. 8 miles can be covered quickly on horseback. Are you suggesting I might visit? I'm suggesting I might, he replied, his voice lower. If that would be welcome. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. It would be very welcome indeed, Mr. Daniels. The small cottage at the edge of Pine Ridge was indeed snug, as Mayor Taylor had described it. A simple 2-room structure with a kitchen, living area with a small fireplace, and a bedroom just large enough for a narrow bed and chest of drawers. But it was clean, watertight, and most importantly, it was her own. Rebecca had spent her first weekend arranging her few possessions, scrubbing floors, and preparing for her first day of teaching. The schoolhouse itself was a single-room building with rows of rough-hewn benches, a teacher's desk, and a wood stove for the coming winter months. On Monday morning, she stood nervously before 12 children ranging in age from 6 to 15, all watching her with expressions varying from curiosity to skepticism. Good morning, she began. I'm Miss Matthews, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher. By midday, she had assessed their varied educational levels, assigned reading for the older children, and begun teaching the youngest their letters. The familiar rhythm of teaching returned quickly, and with it the deep satisfaction of sharing knowledge. When school dismissed, Rebecca watched the children scatter to their homes, feeling a contentment she had missed desperately during her months as a cook. This was her calling, her purpose, guiding young minds toward understanding. She was gathering her materials when a shadow fell across the schoolhouse door. Looking up, she was surprised to see Victor standing there, hat in hand. Mr. Daniels. She straightened, suddenly conscious of her wind-blown hair and chalk-dusted apron. I wasn't expecting visitors. Forgive the intrusion. He stepped inside, his tall frame seeming to fill the small schoolhouse. I was delivering cattle to the railroad surveyor's camp and thought I would inquire how your first day proceeded. Very well, thank you. She smiled, genuinely touched by his interest. The children are bright and eager to learn, despite their months without formal education. Victor nodded, glancing around the sparse schoolroom. You have adequate supplies? We make do with what we have. Books are limited, but the mayor assures me more have been ordered from Helena. He frowned slightly. If there's anything you need before then, please don't hesitate to ask. Diamond D has accounts with merchants in several towns. That's very kind. Rebecca gathered her shawl. Would you care to walk me home? It's not far. They strolled together through the small town, drawing curious glances from shopkeepers and passers-by. Victor seemed oblivious to the attention, asking thoughtful questions about her teaching methods and the children's progress. At her cottage gate, he paused. I've taken a liberty, Miss Matthews. There's a package inside, a housewarming gift of sorts. I hope you don't find it presumptuous. Intrigued, Rebecca opened her door to find a large wooden crate on her table. Inside were books, dozens of them, from basic primers to advanced texts on history, mathematics, and natural science. These are from your personal library, she said softly, recognizing several titles she had seen in his study. Duplicates, mostly, or volumes I no longer reference. He stood awkwardly in her doorway. I thought they might be of use until the school supplies arrive. Rebecca ran her fingers reverently over a beautifully illustrated atlas. This is far too generous. Knowledge shouldn't sit gathering dust when young minds hunger for it. He shifted his weight, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. I should take my leave. The hour grows late. Wait. Rebecca moved to the small kitchen area. At least let me offer you coffee before your ride back. To her surprise, he accepted, and soon they sat at her small table with steaming cups between them. The domesticity of the scene struck Rebecca suddenly. This powerful, wealthy rancher sitting in her humble cottage, discussing books and education as evening shadows lengthened outside. Do you miss it? She asked impulsively. Teaching, I mean. Charlie mentioned you taught school before buying the ranch. Victor looked startled. Charlie talks too much. He sighed, rotating his cup slowly. But yes, I taught for 2 years in Pennsylvania before coming west. Another lifetime ago. What made you stop? His expression darkened. The war. Gettysburg. Then this. He tapped his wooden leg. Children need whole men to look up to, not broken ones. I don't believe that, Rebecca said quietly but firmly. Children need wisdom, patience, knowledge, all qualities that have nothing to do with physical wholeness. Victor's piercing blue eyes met hers. You have a generous perspective, Miss Matthews. Not generous. Accurate. She held his gaze steadily. The children would benefit greatly from occasional lessons from someone with your knowledge and experience. A small, incredulous laugh escaped him. Are you offering me a position, Miss Matthews? Perhaps I am. 1 afternoon a week, sharing your knowledge of geography or history. She smiled. Consider it payment for the books. I'll consider it, he said, and something in his tone made her heart quicken. Though I may require additional incentive, such as dinner, perhaps, next Sunday. There was an unfamiliar vulnerability in his expression. At the ranch, Mrs. Peterson has been asking after you. I'd like that very much. After he left, Rebecca stood in her doorway, watching his tall figure ride away in the gathering dusk. Something was changing between them, something both exhilarating and frightening in its possibilities. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Victor would ride into Pine Ridge every Wednesday afternoon to deliver a history or geography lesson to Rebecca's enraptured students. His extensive travels and natural storytelling ability captivated even the most restless children, and Rebecca found herself equally enthralled by his knowledge and the animation that transformed his usually serious features when discussing ancient civilizations or distant lands. Every Sunday, he would arrive with his buggy to take her to dinner at Diamond D. Mrs. Peterson, delighted by the development, outdid herself with each meal, and afterward, Rebecca and Victor would often walk along the creek or sit in his study discussing books, territorial politics, or educational theories. As October painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Rebecca realized she had never been happier. Her days were filled with the joy of teaching, and her evenings, especially those spent with Victor, brought a different, deeper contentment. The townsfolk noticed. Whispers followed her at church and in the general store. Some were approving. The wealthy rancher and the schoolteacher made a handsome pair, while others contained notes of envy or concern about the propriety of their friendship. People are talking, Rebecca mentioned one Sunday evening as they sat before the fire in Victor's study after dinner. People always talk, he replied, seemingly unconcerned. Does it trouble you? Not for myself, she said truthfully. But your position in the community is secure enough to withstand gossip. He set aside the book they had been discussing. Rebecca, it was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent warmth through her. There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Victor rose and moved to stand before the fire, his back to her. The railway work begins next month. Once completed, Pine Ridge will grow. The school will expand. Yes, I expect so. She watched him, puzzled by his suddenly formal tone. You'll need a proper schoolhouse. The current building is inadequate for winter, let alone for an increasing population. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I've purchased land at the north end of town and commissioned plans for a new school building, with separate classrooms, proper heating, and attached living quarters for the teacher. Rebecca stared at him in astonishment. Victor, that's incredibly generous. It's practical, he countered. An investment in the community's future. Even so, it must be terribly expensive. I have the means. He hesitated, then moved to sit beside her on the sofa. But there's a condition attached to my gift. Oh, Rebecca felt suddenly nervous. The attached living quarters, they're designed for a family. A teacher's family. His voice grew softer. Your family, Rebecca, if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca felt her heart thundering in her chest. This is unexpected, she managed. Is it? His blue eyes held hers intently. Haven't we been moving toward this since the moment you arrived at Diamond D? Perhaps they had been, though neither had acknowledged it openly. The dinners, the long conversations, the growing comfort in each other's presence, all signposts on a journey neither had initially planned. Victor, she paused, gathering her thoughts. Marriage is a significant step. Are you certain? There are younger women without my independent streak. I don't want a younger woman or someone without your spirit. His hand covered hers, warm and strong. I want you, Rebecca Matthews, with your intelligence, your compassion, and yes, your independence. You've brought life back to this house, back to me, in ways I never expected. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. And what am I teaching? Would you expect me to give it up? Never. He seemed shocked at the suggestion. Your teaching is part of who you are. I would no more ask you to abandon it than I would ask you to stop breathing. A smile touched his lips. Though I may request that our children, when they come, have the advantage of their mother's instruction. Our children. The words sent a thrill through her. You've thought this through quite thoroughly, haven't you? I've had little else on my mind these past weeks. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I love you, Rebecca. I believe I began falling in love with you that first morning when you served me properly brewed coffee and looked me in the eye without flinching. Rebecca laughed softly. And I thought you merely appreciated my cooking. The cooking was merely the beginning. He lifted her hand to his lips. Will you have me, Rebecca? With my wooden leg and my occasional dark moods. Yes, she whispered, her heart full. Yes, I will have you, Victor Daniels, with all that you are. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that spoke of long restraint finally released. When they parted, both breathless, Rebecca rested her forehead against his. Mrs. Wilson will be scandalized, she murmured. Victor chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. Mrs. Wilson has been not so subtly encouraging this outcome for weeks. I believe she and Mrs. Peterson have a wager on the timing of my proposal. Rebecca laughed, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. Then we mustn't keep them in suspense any longer. They were married on Christmas Eve in Pine Ridge's small church, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles for the occasion. The entire town attended, along with all of Diamond D's cowboys and staff. Rebecca wore a gown of deep blue velvet, Victor's gift, with a lace collar and pearl buttons, her chestnut hair adorned with a simple wreath of holly berries. Victor, resplendent in a new black suit, stood straight and tall beside her, his wooden leg concealed beneath perfectly tailored trousers. When he spoke his vows, His deep voice carried clearly through the church, steady and certain. I promise to cherish you all the days of my life, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, and to walk beside you in joy and in sorrow. Rebecca's voice trembled with emotion as she responded. I promise to be your partner in all things, to bring warmth to your darkest days, and to remind you always of the goodness within you that others may not see, but that I treasure above all things. The reception at Diamond D Ranch House lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and more food than even Mrs. Peterson had ever prepared. Victor surprised everyone, Rebecca most of all, by leading her in a waltz, moving with unexpected grace despite his prosthetic. You've been practicing, she whispered as he guided her around the floor. For weeks, he admitted. Fitzgerald is a patient instructor, though his feet may never recover. As midnight approached, they slipped away from the celebration to the main house, where Victor carried her, laughing and protesting, across the threshold of what was now their shared bedroom. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, Victor traced her features in the firelight. Are you happy, Mrs. Daniels? Completely. She kissed his palm. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He drew her closer. When you first arrived at Diamond D, I was a man half alive, merely existing from one day to the next. You brought color back to a world I had resigned myself to seeing only in shades of gray. And you, Rebecca said softly, gave me back my purpose when I thought it lost forever. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in hushed white. Inside, Rebecca and Victor Daniels found warmth in each other's arms, their future stretching before them like an unwritten page, full of promise, challenges, and the abiding love that had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Spring 1880. Rebecca stood on the porch of the Diamond D Ranch house, watching as workers raised the frame of what would become Pine Ridge's new schoolhouse. From this distance, the structure was just a skeleton, but she could envision the completed building with its large windows, separate classrooms, and attached family quarters where she and Victor would live during the school year. Penny, for your thoughts, came Victor's voice behind her. She turned to smile at her husband of 4 months. I was just imagining next fall, teaching in the new building. He came to stand beside her, his arms slipping around her waist. It will be ready by August, according to the foreman. His hand rested lightly on the small swell of her abdomen, just beginning to show beneath her dress. Just in time for you to begin the term before this little one makes his or her appearance. Perfect timing, Rebecca agreed, covering his hand with her own. The baby was due in early December, a Christmas child, almost a year to the day from their wedding. The railway construction had proceeded rapidly through the winter, bringing with it the promised growth to Pine Ridge. New businesses were opening, families moving in, and Rebecca's student roster had doubled. Victor had expanded Diamond D's operations, hiring additional hands and purchasing adjacent lands to increase his herd. But the most significant changes had been personal. Victor smiled more readily now, laughed often, and though his legs still pained him in cold weather, the deeper wounds of his spirit had begun to heal. The darkness that had once shadowed his eyes had receded, replaced by a steady light of purpose and contentment. For Rebecca, life had expanded in ways she could never have anticipated when she'd reluctantly accepted a position as a ranch cook. She continued teaching, but now with Victor's full support and the resources to build the kind of school she had always envisioned. Their Sunday evening literary discussions had become legendary in the community, with local residents and even the occasional visitor from Helena joining them for debate and conversation. And soon, they would be parents, a prospect that filled Rebecca with both trepidation and boundless joy. What if I'm terrible at it? She had confessed one night as they lay in bed. At motherhood, Victor had chuckled. You who manage a classroom of 20 children, each with different needs and temperaments. It's not the same, she'd protested. No, he'd agreed, pulling her close. It's more important and more rewarding. And we'll learn together, as we've done with everything else. Now, standing on the porch, Rebecca felt the baby move, a gentle flutter that still amazed her each time she felt it. He's active today, Victor observed, feeling the movement beneath his palm. Rebecca corrected with a smile. It had become a playful disagreement between them. Victor certain they would have a son, Rebecca equally convinced of a daughter. Either way, he said, pulling her closer. The child will be loved beyond measure. Yes, she agreed, resting her head against his shoulder. Just as I love you beyond measure, Victor Daniels. He turned her gently to face him, his blue eyes warm with emotion. And you, Rebecca Daniels. You changed my life with your kindness, your strength, and your refusal to let me hide in shadows. As the spring breeze carried the sounds of construction and the distant lowing of cattle across the land they both loved, Rebecca stood in her husband's embrace, marveling at how a simple advertisement for a cook had led to this life of such unexpected richness and fulfillment. They had found in each other not just love but a shared purpose, building a legacy of education, community, and family that would endure long after they were gone. And it had all begun with a wealthy cowboy hiring a poor teacher as his cook, neither of them knowing that her kindness would change both their lives forever.